Unlock the secrets of franchising success with the Franchise Life podcast. Hosted by Stacie Shannon. Join us for expert insights, success stories, and practical tips every week. Subscribe now and take your franchise journey to the next level.
Hello and welcome to the Franchise Life. Today I have with me Dan Claps, who is the CEO and co-founder of Voda Cleaning and Restoration. Welcome, Dan.
Stacie, thank you for having me. I'm very excited.
Absolutely. Well, before we get started, I do want to take a moment and congratulate you on all of your success. We've known each other for many years now. You have a strong history in the franchise industry, but this is your first venture as a franchisor. And since launching the brand in April of 2023, you have awarded 230 territories and have 93 franchise partners. So congratulations, that is incredible growth.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I am curious, having exposure to so many brands, and I do want to dive into how Voda came about, but I do want to touch on this first. Having exposure to so many brands and seeing new emerging brands pop up, here and there, what do you think the key to your success is in this growth? Because most franchise brands that become a franchise system, many do not even make it to 100 territories. And fall far short of that. And you are now at 230 in just 2 years. So what do you think the key to your success is?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of components. The first I'll definitely say is team. A lot of times I equate myself to playing in a band, like the Beatles. I'm fortunate to get to be the front man of the band, but there's amazing musicians around me, and so I think team is a huge component. You're exactly right. It's a sobering statistic. 3% of franchisors ever get to 100 territories, and it typically takes 10 years to do it. And the business is extremely difficult until you're at about 100 territories, open and operating. And so it's definitely a mountain you have to climb. And I've been fortunate to be able to kind of knock those numbers out of the park. But I think it really has come down to building a cohesive leadership team. I'm fortunate to have been in franchising 11 years. And so when we started this business, from day one, it was all about building a team of people before we really did anything.
So, okay, that begs the question, how did Voda come about? I know that this was an existing business. It was not called Voda. So I'd love to hear how you found this cleaning and restoration business and how you branded it. Because I have to say, I do love your branding. I don't say that often, but the branding is pretty phenomenal.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'll give you it's going to be a little long-winded answer here because I have to give you kind of the origin kind of chronologically to tell you the answer to that. So I started in franchising in 2014. Before that, in as a kid, I was always an entrepreneur. I had the lemonade stand. I sold lacrosse balls to teammates. Anything where I could create money out of nothing was fascinating to me. When I got into college, I started a side hustle that turned into a business, which was in the staffing recruiting the business. And I always tell people that I'm in the business now of teaching people how to run a business. When I was in college, you could write a book called How to Not Run a Business, and I could have been, the star of the book. So I had this mindset when I had my business in college that if you want something done right, you do it yourself, outwork everyone. I was the business. And in my early 20s, I really hit a wall because you can only go so far when you think that way. So I started looking at what to do next. My dad actually said, "Why don't you look at franchises? They're all about systems and people." So I started looking at franchises. I fell in love with home services. Ironically, I sold Kirby vacuum cleaners for a bit in high school. So it was like home services, it's build a better mousetrap, a better customer service experience, and you can win. The problem was it's early 20s, and I didn't have a ton of money to do a franchise like that. And so I found a franchise called Murphy Business and Financial. Um, and they're a 300 location, at the time, they were a 300 location franchise system. They started in the 80s. Amazing founder, Roger Murphy. And I was able to learn so much by joining that franchise, which what we did there was help people buy and sell businesses as a business broker. So similar to what you do with your candidates, except for existing car washes, gyms, etc. And I was doing that for a while. I started having a lot of what's called a franchise resale, which for your listeners, it's a franchise that's already up and running that someone wants to get out of. And I was helping those owners find a buyer to transition. But a lot of times the buyers would fall in love with the franchise resale. They would get far along and maybe the landlord would change something or the numbers didn't check out or all kinds of different things. And when they didn't buy the existing business, I would think, well, if you love the franchise, what if you just opened a new territory? And what I found was that the people that were buying new territories, they're investing a lot less money. They start with zero issues because it's a new territory, and they could build the business and then sell it down the road for a multiple. So instead of paying a bunch of money up for an existing business, they could start something, grow it, and then sell it for a multiple. So I started to think new franchises were just a better investment a lot of the times. So I started doing really business brokerage and franchise consulting back in 2014 and 2015. And then, long story short, one day I was at home and I realized that I was the business, right? If I didn't answer the phone, I didn't sell businesses and make money. And I really wanted to scale something that was a system. And so also kind of looked in the mirror and realized I was not as great as a franchise consultant or business broker as I was at generating leads for my business. That's what I was really passionate about. And so in 2016, I started a lead generation company called Career Transition Leads in the franchise space. And I did that from 2016 to 2022. Um, Thought I was going to do that business the rest of my life, but an opportunity came where private equity wanted to buy the business, and my partner had a bit more equity than me, and so I learned a lesson: if you don't have 51%, then you don't really decide that, which is fine. We exited the business, and that really set me on to what do I do next? And thank you for the congratulations on the 230 territories, but back then I couldn't think of anything, a business that I could do to succeed. I was very worried. Um, but over time, I realized that I was so passionate about helping people become a business owner in the lead gen company that being a franchisor was really a natural progression. And so, kind of to wrap that up, decided to be a franchisor. Quickly realized that as much as I knew from like theory and conferences and experiences, I had never run a franchise brand. So I recruited our COO, who was my business partner, who had been a franchisor in home services for a decade. So his strengths are my weakness. His weaknesses are my strengths. We were a great partnership. And then we went on and started recruiting people. So I remember in the fall of 2022, I had just recently exited the other business. And my family at a family event said, Dad, who are all those people? You have a COO, a CMO, a VP of sales, a lawyer. You don't even have a business. And and my answer was we're getting the right people on the bus in the right seats, and then we'll figure out where we're going. And then just to kind of wrap that up, like a lot of your listeners, we were looking at different opportunities. We looked at roofing and plumbing and painting. One day we took a piece of paper, we wrote down our playbook of what we wanted out of a business, and restoration, which is the business I'm in, checked every box. So we started looking for a restoration company. I met this gentleman in Northern Virginia that someone told me I should talk to. His name is Dragon. Yes, actually Dragon. He's from Serbia. It's pronounced a bit differently, but he goes by Dragon because we can't roll the R like they do in Serbian. But he had moved here from Serbia in 2004, didn't speak any English, was a lifeguard. Then he was a security guard in a nightclub. Met his now wife there, got engaged, quit the job, said this isn't a place for, to work when you're starting a family. and started working for another person that was frequenting the nightclub that seemed to have a bunch of money because they were always there. And so he said, whatever you do, I just quit this job. Let me come work, for you. So I started working for that gentleman, cleaning carpets. And then that business owner went back overseas and said, look, you run the business, you're doing great, and we'll split the profits. And so he was able to kind of learn the business by also having, like a franchise, having support. In 2009, decided it was time to go on his own and literally started Voda, originally called DNA Pro Cleaning, with his wife, and built the business. They were cleaning carpets, learning off of YouTube how to grow a business. And for 15 years, they did that. We met in October of 2022. I fell in love with the business. I felt a lot like in the movie The Founder with Michael Keaton, where he plays Ray Kroc. That was a lot how I felt. I loved the business. I loved the systems. I loved the culture. And I pretty much stood outside his doors one day and said, you gotta franchise this. So we acquired the business in February of 2023, rebranded to Voda in March of 2023, and started franchising in April of 2023.
Wow, what a story. Um, so how did you come up with the name Voda? It's very unique. And how did you come up with it?
Yeah. So, when we were starting the franchise, I remember saying to Dragon, like, I think we should consider a different name for like a national brand. DNA is a great name. It actually stands for Dragon and Arlene, his wife, and their daughter Angelina. But we thought there could be a bit of a more nationally recognizable brand. And so my CMO Christian at the time, well, he's still with us now, but at that time had said, I got a great branding agency. You're going to love them. Got me really excited, left out the price tag until the end. And then I learned it was 3 times the cost that I thought it should cost to do this type of branding rebrand. And I say this somewhat facetiously and somewhat seriously. I thought about it over the weekend after originally saying no. I called him back up. I said, how long have you been thinking about using this branding agency? And his answer was for years. And I trusted him. But my joke with him was that either the branding will be as good as the one that was a third of the price. We'll just have to take that out of your salary. Kind of kidding, right? But it better be better. And if it's worse, then, maybe another franchise will be hiring, because that would be a pretty bad mistake when we just started working together. And of course, I'm mostly kidding, but Christian bet the farm on us doing that. It was the best investment I had ever made. That agency worked with Target, Home Depot, Yeti coolers, etc. And they created the brand, which most importantly, it's a beautiful brand, but the Easter egg, or kind of the hidden secret there, is Voda actually means water in Serbian. So it pays homage to Dragon's Serbian roots.
Oh, very cool. So you mentioned while you were sharing how Voda came about, that the restoration space ticked every box. So I feel like it would be very much like when a prospect is looking at Voda and exploring different opportunities, they have many times have a checklist of what attributes they're looking for. So what are some of those attributes that the restoration space, you know, how that stood out to you and why it seemed like such a great area for you to invest in as a franchisor?
Yeah. For us, it was a couple really important components. We were looking at restoration from really like an investor's lens, because we had written down what we wanted out of a business, which was, number one, we wanted a business that was recession resistant, something that a economy change, or God forbid a war, pandemic, etc., couldn't affect. Especially back then, we were really thinking about like COVID and pandemics. Number two, we really wanted a business that was something that we call third party paid. So meaning an insurance company or large governments, or like something where the person spending the money didn't feel like restricted to spend the money. Um, Three, we wanted a business that was what we call non-skilled labor. So someone with a good attitude, that's good with their hands, could do the business. I'll give you an example. I love the plumbing space. It's a need, not a want. Insurance pays the bills. It's a very specialized skill set that you need. So restoration, anyone with a good attitude, that's good with their hands, we could train them. Four, we wanted a business that we felt like we could generate leads in a predictable and scalable way around the country. And then five, most importantly, we wanted a business that the industry was strong, that the average revenue of a location, whether it was a Voda franchise, a different restoration franchise, a mom and pop, or, on average was strong and the unit economics were strong. It's like not a fad. This is tried and true, right? Water restoration. The only issue is water restoration, unless I stick a hose through your window while you're sleeping and flood your house, like I can't make you dry a house that isn't dry or convince you to that isn't wet or has mold or fire. And so what we loved about this model is we have the cleaning too. So we do floor cleaning, tile, carpet, upholstery, which gives us predictable revenue and gets really, it's really two franchise models, two revenue streams in one. And that's really what stood out to us.
So, and you have multiple revenue streams, and that definitely is many times an attribute that prospects are looking for. Definitely recession resistant. How do you talk somebody? Because I think prospects, when I talk to them, they go one of two ways. Either some individuals are drawn more to a skilled labor force because they think they're a certain caliber of employee they would be getting then versus restoration where you can take a non-skilled employee and train them. So how do you talk a prospect through a concern if they do have a concern with a non-skilled labor force and potential turnover?
Yeah, I think in home services, at the end of the day, it is a people business. You're definitely going to work with people and have an element of people, which is just part of running a business. So you have to like leading people. I always say home services is a people business. So if you're not a people person, it's not the business for you. Um, we have a really great program called Talent Scout, which actually helps our franchise owners find an operations manager or lead tech, kind of like a recruiting element to our business. But what I think the kind of unintended consequence or kind of thing we didn't know until we got into this is that restoration people are very passionate about restoration. And so there's actually a whole large pool of people that know restoration, that it's their career, and you can bring them into your company. We win them over in recruiting by just the simple things, treating them well, paying them well, branded uniforms, and creating a great culture. So we have a way to attract great restoration professionals. A lot of times in restoration, it's a guy or a gal that maybe didn't go to college, or maybe they were a little bit lost in their early 20s, but they found restoration at one point, and this becomes their career. And so we've really been fortunate that people are passionate about restoration. But with that said, there is turnover. You're going to deal with people leaving and coming and going, but I think it's a little bit different just because they're so passionate about it.
Dan, you said yourself there are mom and pop restoration businesses out there, both cleaning and restoration, mom and pop, and large franchisors in this space that have uh, a long heritage. So, what makes Voda stand out among the rest of the brands that are out there in this space?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I think about any franchise, there's five things I think a franchise investor or candidate should think about. Number one is how are you going to get customers, and how's the franchisor going to support you? Number two, when you have customers, how are you going to get employees to support those and service those customers? Three is what you're asking, the USP, unique selling proposition. Chances are there's already a franchise industry brand in your market, and so how do you stand out? For the numbers have to make sense. No one's ever, including me, woken up saying, when I grow up, I want to be in the water restoration business. And five is the day in the life of an owner. And so as far as the USP, We stand out in a couple ways. So first off, when it comes to water restoration, people go to Google, they search, and whoever shows up, they call, and if they get a good answer, they go with. You don't shop around. And so being good at SEO and lead generation is definitely one of our core competencies. And then having a call center to answer the phones because speed to lead is key. So a lot of it's just winning through speed to lead. The other way is obviously branding plays a role, but we've tracked really great franchise owners that are executive types, and they go out there and they build relationships with property managers and plumbers. And the type of owners we attract are doing a great job going out there. They're competing against typically, you know, a little bit less sophisticated of an operator, a little less organized. And so we teach them the playbooks and kind of the fishing holes to go fishing in, but there's great referrals from property managers, plumbers. And then finally, because we do the floor cleaning, it really is a flywheel. So the more carpets we clean, the more the trucks are on the road, the more reviews we get. Reviews equal revenue that helps with SEO. We can go to a Planet Fitness, clean their floors, end up landing other Planet Fitness floors. And then next thing you know, when they have a water event, they're going to call us because we're already in their business several times a quarter. And so really that floor cleaning gives us a foot in the door for more restoration work.
What percentage of an average location is the cleaning versus the restoration?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. When we first started with Voda in 2022, the business did 1.7 million in gross sales with a 23% net profit margin. We got involved in February of 2023, and at the end of that year, we ended up doing 2.4 million with 27% net profit margin. So how did we grow revenue and profit? Dragon and his team really focused from 2022, 38% of the revenue being restoration and the rest cleaning to 50-50, give or take, cleaning and restoration. And then last year we did 2.7 million with a similar mix. So our franchise owners really try to mix like kind of that even mix. It does depend per location. But the beauty of this business is you're not buying just a restoration business. You're not buying just a cleaning business. You're buying a cleaning and restoration business. And so it's important to focus on both. The cleaning is usually you're not going to build this huge company doing floor cleaning, but it's going to pay your bills. It's going to get your trucks on the road. It's going to give your teammates something to do while you chase those larger restoration business opportunities.
So when a new location opens up, the low hanging fruit for that franchise owner then to start generating revenue would be more on the cleaning side, as then they start to form those relationships in the community from the commercial side. Would that be accurate?
1000%. Yeah, we really try to encourage our franchise owners to go out there and build their cleaning business first, and as the restoration takes off. But I always say, at the end of the day, when you join a franchise, a lot of people don't realize this, at least in our culture. Um, there's playbooks and there's frameworks and there's so much guidance on what to do. But at the end of the day, when you buy a franchise, what's the business card? What's the title on the card going to say? It's going to say owner. And so it's completely up to our owner's discretion on if they focus more on one or the other. But as we've grown, we have a lot of examples where a franchise owner that's a little bit more legacy will say, hey, I did the same thing. I got really focused on restoration because it's high ticket. But 6 months later, wish I had done more cleaning. And so we try to really encourage our franchise owners to focus on both, but it is their decision how they run their business.
Yep. At the end of the day, they're part of a system, but they're responsible for that profit and loss. So, okay. So let's talk about, you've already touched a little bit on financials. I know that you recently went through a franchise disclosure document update, FDD. So what is the 2025 investment range for a single territory for Voda?
Yeah. It's interesting. We've learned as we've grown that we don't want people on the lower end of the investment. And so we've really put into our item 7 every single cost that we could think of, including a substantial amount of working capital. And so, it's more on that, 270,000 on, high end But then with the SBA, with a truck, it could be more in the 330,000 range. But keep in mind, that's with a truck being included in the investment. We do have, a lower side, but really you want to be over that, that 200 and, oh my goodness, 270,000 kind of range. Um, but what I'll tell you is we learned something very important last year that, that really plays a huge role in this. At Voda, something I'm very proud of, and for those that are listening, item 19 is in your FDD, your franchise disclosure document, audited financials. It's what we're legally allowed to talk about. Last year, of our franchise owners that were operating for 12 months, which was many of them, our average owner does $500,000 their first year, with some doing $1 million and some a little bit less, or a few a lot less, which I love, because if you're going to join a franchise, if you want to be average, which is strong, 500,000, I don't even want you in the system, because if you went to a job and you said, "What's your average employee?" That's what I want to be. Like, that's not how you get into anything, right? You want to try to aim for the moon, but our average is 500,000. And so what we found is a great franchise owner, they invest in their business, they invest in marketing, they invest in systems. And so I do believe, to succeed in a business like restoration, you got to have capital. You got to be what we call a mayor of the town out there networking, and you got to be willing to follow the system.
So the franchise owners that you have in your system today, are they primarily owner operator, or do you have some semi-passive owners as well, or what we call executive model?
Yeah, this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. So I have a very different definition of semi-absentee than many others do, and I don't think it's relevant to whether you own gyms, brick and mortar of any sort, or home services. I do think home services is going to typically be a little bit more hands-on than, like, owning a bunch of boutique fitness studios. If you could imagine, it's four walls versus being out and mobile. So naturally, it's going to have a little bit more moving parts, a lot more upside, lower investment as well. But it's going to be a little bit more hands-on, usually, than like a chain of gyms. Um, I have two answers. My first answer is, I'm going to use gyms as an example. Let's say you owned 3 Orange Theory fitness locations and I owned 3. You had a great GM, you worked out with them once or twice a week, you had a real relationship. You gave them accountability, profit sharing, you were a cheerleader for them, held them accountable. And I had a GM where I didn't build a personal relationship. My mood swings went up and down. I didn't empower them. I didn't give them profit shares, just paid them a straight salary. Who do you think would end up working more in their business, you or me? Me, right? Because I'm not managing properly. It's not Orange Theory that changes that, it's the manager. And so a lot of this has to do with the franchise owner. But my definition of semi-absentee is, you build a team of people that operate the business and you're out there growing the business. So for example, for me with Voda, I'm doing this podcast with you. Most of my day is focused on revenue generating activities, whether it's increasing average unit volume of our franchise owners, increasing our franchise owner footprint, recruiting and teammates to join. These are all revenue generating activities. So to me, an owner is going to Starbucks for an interview with a potential technician. Then they're driving over to a networking event. They're involved in their business, just in growing it. Now, we do have owners that are not salespeople. They're more of an operations person. But in those cases, they're hiring a salesperson. And so, sorry for such a long-winded answer, but it really ranges, because I have owners that are top producers in other home service brands. They come here, they've got a team, they've got experience, they're really hands-off. And then I've got other owners, this is their first business. My best answer, if you've never owned a business, if you have a little bit less capital, and if you're not really willing to spread the pie, meaning give some equity incentives to your team, you should probably assume you're going to be a little bit more involved. If you're willing to invest in the team, invest in infrastructure, give teammates like a share of the profits and equity, and you can focus on being a mayor of the town or higher that way, then you could be less involved. But I tend to think, never trust a $50,000 a year teammate with your multi-$100,000 business. You should typically in the beginning be a bit more involved. Even if that means you're working a job that's flexible, you should be thinking about Voda a lot.
Semi-passive, the definition of semi-passive or executive model, it varies from brand to brand. And for anybody that thinks that they can, go into a business investment as an executive model investor and not work on the business. And I say that intentionally. You're not working in the business. You're not out there, in your case, cleaning floors. You're not doing the quotes, what have you, but you're working on growing the business. You won't be successful if you're not involved. Certainly for a newer investor, as you mentioned. Uh, all right. So one last piece of advice from you. What advice would you give someone, a prospect that is looking at the home services industry, but is on the fence about restoration? What advice could you give them in their decision-making process?
And apologies, I just want to clarify. I realized when I answered your question on the item 7, I just want to make sure I give a very clear range. There's 176 to 257 range, right? So there is a lower range, but I do typically encourage people to push closer to that higher number. And then it can be a larger range if you're financing the truck, if you're pulling the truck into the SBA. The SBA, as you know, has changed a bit, so the truck's included there, and so um, there's a range there. So just want to clarify that. But my advice, well, the first thing I would probably do is ask what the concern of restoration is. But a couple of things. One, you do not need to be passionate about restoration. You need to be passionate about people, growing a team. You should definitely have a tremendous respect for the trade. You don't have to be a restoration person. I'm not at all in any way. I'm the least handy person you'll meet. I can't even change a light bulb. Um, and trust me, people make fun of me for it. And so you don't need to be hands-on, but you need to have respect for the people that do the business. And then number two, you're not typically doing water events at 3 in the morning. It happens once in a while. That's not the bulk of the business. It really does typically happen more during, somewhat regular hours. With that said, I think this is a more intense business than maybe lawn care, for example, simpler. But I think this has one of the highest opportunities when you look at the average unit volume, when you look at the economics, when you see many franchisees of many restoration franchise chains or even selling their businesses to private equity franchisees. You see it so often in restoration. And so I think it's a business for people that want to build a big business. It may not make sense for someone that wants to be a little bit simpler to wrap their head around. It's a little bit more of an action business than maybe some other industries, but I think it's one of the most lucrative.
All right. So I'm going to do one last question. So, when you talk about individuals that want to build a big business, typically that is going to involve a multi-territory investment. So within your system, what is the average territory investment that you see across your franchise partners?
It's interesting. We designed our territories they're fairly large. It's 85,000 owner occupied households, which equates to around, on average, 350,000 people in a territory, which is much larger than a lot of home service brands. We did that by design. We would rather see a franchise owner invest less in franchise fees and more in their actual business. And so if they buy 2 territories with us, it's pretty large comparative to other brands. Historically, it's been around, a 2.4 territory, 2.5 territory average. There's different situations. We have times where people buy 1. We have people investing in 3. I tend to think 2 is the sweet spot. But it depends. If you're well capitalized and you want to build a bigger pie, that's different. But I think the average owner, I think 2 is a good strong 2 to 3 is really the range we see.
All right. Well, Dan, thank you so much for joining me. Again, it's been really fun and interesting to watch your success over the past couple years couple years transitioning from where I first met you career transition leads to being a franchisor. And it feels like you did it overnight from my perspective, but I know from yours and what you shared, that definitely wasn't the case. But again, congratulations on building such a fantastic franchise brand.
Thank you.
All right. For anybody that is interested in learning more about Voda Cleaning and Restoration, please feel free to reach out to me at Stacie@fusionfranchising.com. Thanks and have a great day.
Thanks for listening. Subscribe for more on the franchise life.